Hello and welcome to the Target UPSC Prelims 2025 Current Affairs Revision Series, and this is the third episode of the Environment and Ecology section. So if you haven't watched the first and the second episode, you can go and watch out the first and the second episode in the playlist section. And apart from the environment subject, there are other subjects also which you can see for your revision for the upcoming exam, like for example economy, art and culture, environment, science and technology, and many others. So let us begin with this episode, and the first topic that we will be covering is the seventh session of the International Solar Alliance. So this was in news because India has been re-elected as the president of the International Solar Alliance during the 7th ISA Assembly, affirming its leading role in the global solar energy efforts. As ISA, the founding countries was also India and France, and the headquarters of the ISA is also situated in Gurgaon, India, that is Gurugram now. So, India has been re-elected as the president of the ISA, and it was held in New Delhi. This session emphasized on agrivoltaic farming, energy access and sustainability with participation from around 120 nations. So, the basic aim was with regard to the agrivoltaic farming and the energy access. Now, energy access is to be able to shift from the fossil fuels to the renewable energy, and basically with regard to the solar energy. Now, when we talk about the agrivoltaic farming, so it is farming, and it you can say is a sustainable mode of farming. It is a sustainable mode of farming in which solar energy plus agriculture takes place at the same time. Now, like for example, if imagine this is a area, and in this area big solar panels are placed. So with regard to agrivoltaic areas, in the same area where the big solar panels are present, then at the lower side or the lower land of the same area will be used for sustainable agriculture, and that is why it is known by the name of agrivoltaic farming. And energy access and sustainability aspect needs to be there because of the increase, more and more increase of the renewable energy, and solar energy is at the forefront of it. Delegates highlighted India's innovation in combining solar energy generation with agriculture. What was the key point? So the ISA launched several key initiatives to advance global solar energy adoption, as the main aim of the International Solar Alliance was sustainability and moving away from the fossil fuel consumption towards a cleaner energy, renewable energy, and solar energy is at the forefront of it because of the sustainability aspect. So the main aim is to increase the use of solar energy. So the Solar X Startup Challenge, which was introduced at the COP27, supported innovative solar businesses in ISA member countries. So the member countries of the ISA, they pledge to be moving towards the renewable energy. Then the Star C initiative, which strengthened solar energy or solar technology skills in developing economies, while the Global Solar Facility catalyzed investment in underserved regions, particularly Africa. So the main aim is to strengthen the solar technology skills in the developing economies. So the developing economies and the underserved areas will be the main focus of it. And the viability gap funding scheme provided grants to the solar projects in least developed countries and the small island developing states, because these countries will not be able to bear the financial burden of it. And the viability gap funding scheme, what does it do? That it tends to give grants to the countries or to the big infrastructure projects which has been done through the PPP mode, that is the public private partnership, but the country or the entity is not able to bear the financial burden of it. So in the form of grants, financial help is given to these countries. So the Green Hydrogen Innovation Center also explored synergies between solar energy and hydrogen. Now, when we talk about green hydrogen, so green hydrogen is also a clean energy. When we say clean energy, it means that the combustion process does not include the combustion of carbon into the atmosphere or nature. And basically green hydrogen, when we say, it is also formed through the process of electrolysis, and it does not, the combustion of carbon into the atmosphere does not take place, and it is a clean fuel or clean form of energy. Now when we talk about the International Solar Alliance, so it was established in the year 2015. Headquarters is in Gurugram. Director General as of now is Ashish Khanna, and the basic motive is to facilitate energy access, ensure energy security, and drive energy transition in its member countries, shifting from fossil fuels towards the renewable energy, that is the solar energy. Now the important projects under the ISA is One Sun, One World, One Grid, International Solar Alliance Solar Technology and Application Resource Center, then Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Scheme. So these are few of the important projects under it. Now the next topic is India's first pilot project for underground coal gasification. Underground coal gasification. So the news was that the Ministry of Coal, Eastern Coalfields Limited, is conducting a pilot project for underground coal gasification at the Khasta coal block in Jamtara district of Jharkhand. As Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh are known as the coal capital of India. So the key points is the aim is to revolutionize the coal industry by using in situ coal gasification, and the aim for the in situ coal gasification is to convert it into valuable gases, and these valuable gases, like for example, is methane, hydrogen, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. Then these gases can be utilized to produce synthetic natural gas. When we talk about synthetic natural gas, so synthetic natural gas is an alternative to the natural gas, and it has the same properties and the same nature as the natural gas. It is just that it is synthetic in nature, it has been prepared differently. Chemical feedstocks for fuels, fertilizers, explosives and other industrial applications. Then the Ministry of Coal is fully committed to promoting coal gasification projects, recognizing their potential to transform coal into various high value chemical products. So it is basically the transformation of the coal. Then the first phase involves creating a technical feasibility report. So the technical feasibility report through borehole drilling and core testing. Borehole drilling and core testing. And the next phase will focus on coal gasification at a pilot scale. Then the successful execution of this pilot project is expected to create transformative opportunities for India's energy sector, highlighting the sustainable and efficient use of country's coal resources. So the coal resources already, if we talk about coal, then it is basically found in India in the region of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. And when we talk about fossil fuels, then the import of fossil fuels takes place, and India is dependent on the import of fossil fuels completely. Now about coal gasification, what is the process of it? Then coal gasification is a process in which coal is partially oxidized with air, oxygen, steam or carbon dioxide to form a fuel gas. So here the oxidization of coal takes place, and then it gets converted to the fuel gas, and that is why it is known as gasification of coal. This gas is then used instead of piped natural gas, methane and others for driving energy. Then in situ gasification of coal or underground coal gasification is the technique of converting coal into gas while it is still in the seam and then extracting it through wells. So the conversion of coal into gas takes place. Now how the production of syngas or the synthetic gas takes place? So it produces syngas, which is a mixture, and the mixture consists of methane, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, carbon dioxide and water vapor. So these are the gas which combines together and they form the syngas. Syngas can be used to produce a wide range of fertilizers, fuels, solvent and synthetic materials. So these are the use of the syngas. Next topic is the rat hole mining and the tragedy which took place in Assam's Dima Hasao brought back the attention on the topic of the red hole mining. So what is basically the red hole mining? So first of all, you need to look at this picture, look at this hole and the length and the width of this hole. It is a very small hole, and imagine in these kind of holes, the men or the children or the women or the children of a very young age also, they enter and they collect coal. Then the red hole mining is a primitive, crude, labor intensive and hazardous method of coal mining, and it involves digging a very small tunnel. Look at this image, and this tunnel is usually 3 to 4 feet deep and 2 to 3 feet wide. So the width and the depth is almost, you can say, same into the ground, in which workers, more often children, enter and then they extract the coal from it. And it is typically practiced in the northeastern India and in the regions basically in Meghalaya and Assam. Now, what are the methods of extraction of coal under the red hole mining? So, first and foremost is the side cutting procedure. So, what is the side cutting procedure? It involves digging narrow tunnels into hill slopes. So, if these are hills, then the narrow tunnel is dug into the hill slopes and to get access to the coal seams, and this is usually less than 2 meters in height. Then the next technique is the box cutting procedure. Now what is a box cutting procedure? So it is basically, under this method, a rectangular opening is first created. So usually a circular opening, and under the box cutting a rectangular opening is created, and it is followed by digging a vertical pit. So a rectangular opening will be done and a vertical pit will be digged under it. Then horizontal tunnels resembling rat holes are then dug for coal extraction. So first of all, see these. These are the starting point of the rat hole mining, and then the vertical digging is done, and then the horizontal is also done, and through this the person enters and they extract coal from it. Now, how is red hole mining regulated in India? So, red hole mining is illegal and falls under the jurisdiction of the state or district administration to address as a law and order issue. So, it is basically illegal in India and falls under the state and the district administration. And in the year 2014, the national NGT, that is the National Green Tribunal, it banned the red hole mining due to the numerous incident of fatalities that takes place particularly during the monsoon season. And the Supreme Court of India in the year 2019, it upheld the decision of the National Green Tribunal, and the ban on red hole mining in Meghalaya originally imposed by the NGT. So the Supreme Court has also upheld the NGT order. Supreme Court ruled that such mining is illegal under the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act 1957. So you must know that basically red hole mining is illegal in India. Now the next topic is the new Ramsar sites that has been added to the list. So the Udva Lake in Jharkhand, which became the first Ramsar site of Jharkhand, and then two more sites to Tamil Nadu, that is the Tirthangal and the Sarakotai in Tamil Nadu, and Khichropalri in Sikkim. So Jharkhand and Sikkim has received their first Ramsar sites, and two more Ramsar sites has been added to Tamil Nadu. So these are the first Ramsar sites of Sikkim and Jharkhand, and with this the total number of Ramsar sites in India has increased to 89. Earlier it was 85, now 4 has been added, so the number has went on to 89. And Tamil Nadu in India has the maximum number of Ramsar sites, and that is 20, followed by Uttar Pradesh, which has 10 sites. So now what is Ramsar sites? So the name Ramsar is basically has been taken as the Ramsar Convention was signed in the Iranian city named Ramsar in the year 1971. So the Ramsar Convention is an international agreement because many countries have signed this agreement for the protection of the wetlands from 1971, and the aim is to protect wetlands worldwide, as these areas are vital for keeping plants and animals healthy, and also for the overall well-being of the food chain and the food web and the biodiversity around the around the wetland. Then wetlands clean water, store carbon, help prevent floods and provide a home for many species. Now when we talk about wetlands, it can be fresh water or salty water or brackish water. It can be man-made, it can be natural in nature. The water can be flowing, the water can be static at one place, and it can be of large depth, it can be of less depth, it can be small in nature, it can be large in nature, and they are basically known as the kidneys of the earth. Then when a wetland becomes a Ramsar site, it is recognized as a globally important site and must be protected by national and international rules. India has joined the convention in 1982 and has been adding more number of sites into the Ramsar sites. The real challenge is ensuring these sites are not just names on the list but healthy and thriving ecosystems also. Now, what basically are wetlands? Wetlands are areas where water is the primary factor controlling the environment and the associated plant and animal life. So, water is the primary factor, and that water, which is the primary factor, it controls the associated life of animals and plants which are dependent on it. They occur where the water table is at or near the surface of the land, or where the land is covered by water. Now, wetlands are defined as lands transitional between territorial and aquatic ecosystem where the water table is usually at or near the surface, or the land is covered by shallow water. So, basically a transitional area between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. So, it is not completely aquatic and it is not completely terrestrial. It is in between. It is not that it is completely filled with water and there is too much of water, and it is not that it is completely dry also. So it is a transitional area. It means it is a area which comes between the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystems. It is often called as the nature's kidney and nature's supermarket, as wetlands supports millions of people by providing food, water, controlling floods and storm surges, and it is also considered to be a great source of carbon sink. Now the next topic is the National Wildlife Health Policy. So it was in news because recently the Indian government has proposed a national wildlife health policy, and the aim is to address health threats faced by wildlife. Then the policy will complement India's National Wildlife Action Plan from the year 2017 to the year 2031 and the One Health Policy. And the aim of the One Health Policy is to optimize the health of people, animal and the environment, because they recognize the interdependence of it. It means that the health of the animal, the health of the people and the health of the environment, because they are interdependent, and if even one of the aspect or the element of it gets very deeply impacted, then it will impact the other two also, as the interdependence of each other is there. Now, the National Wildlife Action Plan from the year 2017 to 31, it outlines 103 conservation actions and around 250 projects. Then these include creating a standard protocol for disease surveillance in tiger reserves, protected areas, forests, as well as establishing a legally binding protocol for mercy killing and euthanasia of wild animals. So it is basically protecting the animals which are present under the protected areas like the biosphere reserves or the tiger reserves or the national parks. The policy aimed to promote research and development initiatives which are focused on wildlife diseases and health management strategies. Now, what is the current wildlife health challenges? So, the challenges is with regard to Indian wildlife is facing various health issues, like for example, it includes infectious diseases, and one of the examples of this infectious diseases is the CDV, that is the canine distemper virus. So, the canine distemper virus a few years back was very much in news because of the death of and because of the death of lions which was taking place in the Gir National Park, and it is not that one or two lions died, the number was in double digits. So this became a concerning issue all over India. And then, apart from the infectious diseases, habitat loss, climate change impact, and the illegal activities, like for example, the animals are killed for the illegal activities, like for example, elephants are killed for their tusk, then tigers are killed for their skin. So these kind of illegal activities also needs to be minimized or needs to be shut down. The policy is required as India is home to over 91,000 species of wildlife with more than 1,000 protected areas, and these protected areas include national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and biosphere reserves. Now let us talk about the Central Zoo Authority. So the Central Zoo Authority is a statutory body, and this is a statutory body and it is formed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which was established in the year 1992 under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So a statutory body under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So it is the Central Zoo Authority is chaired by the Environment Minister and has around 10 members and a member secretary to it. Then its objective is to complement and strengthen the national effort in conservation of the rich biodiversity, so that the functioning of the biome or the functioning of the complete environment must take place easily. It must not be hampered. Coming on to the next topic, and that is the emissions gap report for the year 2024. This was in news because the United Nations Environment Program has released the emissions gap report for the year 2024, and this was ahead of the COP29 which took place in Baku, Azerbaijan, and one of the most important COPs, as the demand of the developed and the least developed countries was not fulfilled by the developing countries, as they were asking for the financial help which goes into around 1.3 trillion, but the developed countries agreed to pay 300 billion US dollars. Now the key findings of the global emissions report is, it highlighted that if countries maintain current environmental policies, the global temperature will like to rise by 3.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So if we will keep on moving at the pace we are moving as of now, then the temperature rise will not be restricted to 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees Celsius. It will be going way above 3 degree Celsius, which is a very concerning point. Then full implementation of all nationally determined contributions will still lead to 2.6 degrees Celsius or of warming. Now when we talk about NDC, that is the nationally determined contribution. So nationally determined contributions are the contributions which are formed by every single country with regards to how they will be working to lower down the carbon emissions, or the carbon emissions, or the target year that they have set for themselves to reach the net zero year or the net zero target. Then global greenhouse gas emissions have hit 57.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent gases in the year 2023. India's per capita greenhouse gas emissions in 2022 were 2.9 CO2, significantly lower than China, which was 11, and the US, which was 18. So as compared to China and US, and historically also the China and US has been much bigger, many times much bigger carbon emitter as compared to India. Now about the major emitters. So with regards to the G20 countries contribution, so the G20 excluding the African Union, it contributes around 77% of the global emissions in the year 2023. Then high emissions from key players. So 6 of the largest emitters accounted for around 63% of the emissions globally. So the G20 countries are also contributing at a very high pace. Then a reduction of at least 7.5% each year until the year 2035 is essential to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius target within reach. So every year reduction of 7.5% needs to take place. Achieving net zero by 2050 requires USD 900 billion to USD 2.1 trillion annually. Now 250 net zero target is not of India, it is of the developed countries. So what is India's net zero target? You need to tell me in the comment section. United Nations Environment Program, what is UNEP? It was established in the year 1972 following the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, which took place in Stockholm, and the headquarters is in Nairobi, Kenya. Then the governing body is the United Nations Environment Assembly. It is the governing body of UNEP. Then if we talk about UNEA, then it is world's highest level decision making body for matters related to the environment, with a universal membership of around 193 member countries. Now 193 member countries, 193 member countries association or the membership is considered to be universal in nature, as it has almost covered all the countries. Programs and initiatives are, it runs major initiatives like, for example, the climate action, ecosystem restoration, clean seas, sustainable development goals support. So these are few of the initiatives of it. Now let us talk about the reports which it publishes. It publishes influential reports like the emissions gap report, global environment outlook, adaptation gap report. So these are few of the reports of the UNEA. Coming on to the next topic, and that is the International Snow Leopard Day. Every year on 23rd of October, International Snow Leopard Day is observed, and it came into being in the year 2013 following the adoption of the Bishkek Declaration in Kyrgyzstan, where 12 countries came together and talked about that snow leopard population needs to be conserved. Now, who are those 12 countries? So, they are Afghanistan, Bhutan, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. So basically the Central Asian countries and the Southeast Asian countries. Now about snow leopards. So snow leopards are known as Panthera anchia, and they are considered medium-sized cats that are known for their elusive nature and ability to thrive in harsh, high-altitude environments. Now, when we talk about elusive nature, it means that they are basically hard to find or hard to detect. So, they have the ability to be able to hide themselves and live. They are native to the mountains of Central and South Asia and typically found at elevations between 9,800 feet and above. And they are basically also found around the Himalayas. They are known as ghosts of the mountains due to their elusive nature and ability to blend into their surroundings. Snow leopards, one of the major quality or the feature is that they cannot roar. They do not roar. So they communicate through growls, hisses, meows and also a unique sound called a chuff. So they cannot roar as majority of the big cat species. One of the characteristic features of them is that their ability to roar is very high. But the snow leopards on the other hand, they do not roar. They serve as the top predators and are also the indicator species, and their presence reflects the health of their high altitude ecosystems. Now let us talk about the snow leopard population in India. So as per the snow leopard population assessment in India program, the snow leopard population in India was found to be around 718 individuals. The estimated population in different states are as follows: Ladakh 477, Uttarakhand 124, Himachal Pradesh 51, Arunachal Pradesh 36, Sikkim 21 and Jammu and Kashmir is 9. Now if we talk about that which national park is considered to be the capital of snow leopard in India, then it is the Hemis National Park of Ladakh. So these were few of the topics which we have covered in the third episode of the environment and ecology, and in the end there is a practice question, and like always you people need to tell me the answer in the comments below. So the question is, consider the following about rat hole mining regulation in India. First, rat hole mining is illegal across northeastern states under the MMDR Act. Second, the 6th schedule grants autonomy to tribal areas, complicating enforcement. And third is, Nagaland's coal policy allows unrestricted rat hole mining. Which of the above statements are correct? 1 and 2 only, 2 and 3 only, 1 and 3 only, or all of the above? As we have discussed this in the video, so give me the answer in the comments below. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Till we meet next time. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep subscribing to the channel. Thank you.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.